Honestly, there's 5 things that everybody needs in a recession backpack.
Obviously, given the current situation with Corona or COVID-19, and a lot of people are facing unemployment, businesses going down as well. Do you think there's a risk of us going into recession right now?
I don't think we're at the stage where we're trying to manage the risk of going into a recession. I think we're at the stage where we've got to manage what that recession looks like and what's our response to the recession. What's our pivot to the recession? What's our innovation to the recession? It's a foregone conclusion. The recession is going to happen. It's going to be more than likely global, deep, far-reaching and wide. And so now, that's where the real work begins.
So you're worried about it?
Look, yes and no. I'm worried for the people that haven't prepared. Yeah, definitely. No, because I have prepared, and I don't mean that in any kind of prepper way, but I mean that in terms of I understand cycles. And it was after the 2008 cycle, which I came out of unscathed, but I saw how many people who didn't, and that wasn't even really a big economic collapse, so to speak. It could have been so much worse than the landing that we had. So for me, after that, I've just been someone that's prepared. I've been preparing for some form of financial disaster now for about 7 or 8 years, close on 8 years. And so, I've been frugal, misering, like building, establishing, testing, measuring, because for me, preparing isn't just about collecting acorns. It's also about making sure that the tools that you've got to collect acorns, can actually operate in winter when there's no acorns. So basically, how do you create acorns? I think it's going to go in the direction that it's going to go. And the people who have prepared will, in most cases, thrive. And the people who haven't will essentially, be reconstituted into the system of what the global and national innovation looks like. Because we are going to see incredibly high levels of unemployment. We're already seeing that right now. But what I also think we're going to see at the same time, which is what we're also seeing right now, is massive levels of pivot, massive levels of shift, massive levels of innovation at a digital level and at a people level in terms of people's capacity to be able to work from any location around the world. And so that in itself has just opened up a global workforce for those unemployed people. And it's now finding the recomposition strategy to put those people back into the new jobs that will be created as a result of the new economy that will be born as a result of all of these changes. Because that's what's going to happen. There'll be a new economy that will be born. We're seeing new governance born on a daily basis. We'll see new economics that are born. And it's, in many respects, it's going to be, a lot easier after this for people, and this might sound strange, but what I'm going to see happening is it's going to be a lot easier for people to grow after this than it was perhaps before, because we've reached such incredibly inflated heights of performance, of economic growth, as nationally, internationally, geopolitically, globalization. And it's interesting now when we reflect on that conversation with David Suzuki, where he was saying, in order for us to survive as a species, we have to get comfortable with negative growth. We have to get comfortable with negative economics. And what I'm seeing right now, and I've been having this conversation with David in my head the last couple of days, is we're seeing that event. We're seeing, but it's not happening slowly. There's going to be a massive event which is going to obviously crash a number of economies. But what we're going to see from that reset is the ability for, the potential for more of a even starting point, because we're not playing in an overly inflated world necessarily. And this could be, economic ideology, who knows? But I honestly believe that this reset will give a lot more people the opportunity, not just in the way that we recomposition ourselves in terms of a workforce, but also in terms of resetting the benchmark of what's affordable. Making houses more affordable, making cars more affordable, the cost of living more affordable, and I see there being a shift with people focusing more on, lifestyle and living versus just being out there in the world and doing all the time.
What's a way to make the most out of this situation for an unemployed?
Look, the way to make the most of this situation if you're unemployed and you haven't built a war chest and you've been living week to week is you need to radically familiarise yourself with your value proposition in the new world. And what I mean by that is, what are your skills? What are your core skills that you know that you can deploy to add value in the new environment? Well, I'm now remote. I'm a massage therapist. Okay, but do you also have a kinesiology, qualification that you can use for phone consults? We've got to start thinking a little bit differently, if not a lot differently. And that's just the reality for so many people right now, that if you don't, then that's worst case scenario. If you don't look for ways to recomposition yourself, that's worst case scenario. If you don't look for ways to develop and grow yourself, that's worst case scenario. Because yeah, it's only if we can't find a proper solution to recomposition, I think we're gonna have real big problems. Because what do you do if you've got 2 million people who are unemployed, on a system that can't support them potentially? That could get ugly.
In terms of perspective, is there a way to look at as an unemployed person right now, this is an opportunity?
Absolutely. Every situation is opportunity depending on your mindset. And right now, a lot of people's mindset is being challenged. But I think the biggest challenge is most people, who have done any form of personal development have only done it in a baseline environment, in a closed environment where everything's nice and safe and secure. And so there's a whole bunch of new news now. There's new levels of unemployment, new levels of businesses that are going bust. But with these news, we've got this new perspective. And right now, it is going to be very difficult for a lot of people to look at this and go, well, where is the balance? It's like going through a breakup. There's no balance in the midst of a breakup. There's no balance in the midst of a divorce. There's no balance in the, in the ICU if you're in traction because you've just, savagely broken your back or your leg. The transcendence comes from the experience, not necessarily in most cases the event itself. And so I don't necessarily think that everyone's going to be able to balance this perspective easily. If anything, I think it's going to be one of the most challenging things of our time, if not possibly even our history, our written history. But I guess time will tell.
So what's the key to getting to that balance eventually?
I think the key to getting to that balance is just using the tools. And the tools are, what's the benefit of this? What skills, knowledge and experience am I gaining from this? How will this make me bigger, better, faster, stronger, more stronger tomorrow than I am today? And if we're allowing ourselves to succumb to the suggestion of the environment in terms of the dominating thoughts of our mind, then we're also fucked. So we've really got to control the narrative. I think it's a really good question. I think one of the most important things that we can all do right now is control the narrative. Because the narrative is creating the fear, the narrative for some is creating preparation, the narrative for some is creating anxiety, the narrative for some is creating innovation and pivots. And I think what we've got to do right now is look at who's controlling the narrative. And no, I'm not talking about the media, I'm not talking about the governments, I'm talking about yours. Who's controlling your fucking narrative? Who's controlling the story that you're running in your head and what all of this means? Are you buying into the global conspiracy or the health conspiracy or whatever's going on? And the reality is, who fucking knows? But what I do know is this, we are ultimately the architect. And the more you own that narrative, the easier life just naturally becomes. Because we're no longer subjecting ourselves to a narrative that is external from ourselves, which is just someone else's external representation of their reality, and you're consuming someone else's expression of reality and you're taking it on as your own. And what I'm suggesting is don't do that. What I'm suggesting is create your own narrative, write your own narrative. Like literally, get old school, write your own narrative. Start writing your own story, redefining what the situation looks like and means. Fuck, Helen Keller wasn't born, out of sunshines and blue skies. Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl became one of the greatest psychologists of our time as a result of the experience that he had, almost dying multiple times and seeing enormous amounts of death, in German concentration camps. We've got to understand that although we may not be experiencing the balance in the narrative at the moment, but we are in control of the narrative and where that narrative ultimately goes. And that will determine your reality. And this is my challenge. I'd say to everyone watching this video, what is the number one benefit that you have seen? And don't tell me there's fucking none, because I'm seeing plenty. I'm seeing an abundance of love, abundance of collaboration. And I'm not saying the other stuff isn't there, but I'm saying there's beauty there. And so I want to know the top 1 to 3 most beautiful things, the biggest benefits. What's the greatest benefit? How's this made you better, fitter, faster, stronger today than you were yesterday as a result of this fucking virus? Let me know.
What have you, Kerwin Ray, done to prepare?
Look, what I've done to prepare for the recession is I've prepared for a recession. I legit have not just been preparing for something, I've been preparing for a recession. So, whenever I work with any client, and I am my greatest client, I'm always looking at the level of de-risking that's required to maintain operations under any circumstances, but also having a level of streamlining capabilities and lean capabilities that enable you to run the organization, in a range of sizes of scale, but still efficiently and effectively depending on what the market conditions are. I've never been more grateful for my obsessive compulsive PTSD, ADHD, dyslexic behaviors, because I think of every worst case scenario, I create plans for every worst case scenario, and I actually really fucking enjoy thinking about worst case scenario because it's just how my brain operates. And so I don't want to necessarily say that I am naturally someone who is prepared, but I prepared for this by being ready for a worst case scenario and thinking contingently. And the reason I think contingently is because I've had skydiving accidents. And so I thought, okay, well, how do I avoid that? You know, I've failed in business 3 times, and I've asked the question, well, how do I avoid that? You know, I've skinned my hands, I've cut my hands, I've had all sorts of accidents, and I learned my lessons from that. And the reason I prepare is because I know that preparation in most cases isn't required, but when it is, it's so amazing to have something there. And so my saying, and I've said this for fucking decades, I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And that is literally how I've lived, how I leave every house. Like when I leave the house, when I'm in the car, when I'm leaving the car, what I leave behind, what I pack in my bag, will I need this? What is the potential scenarios that I'm walking into? You know, and again, it's not Mortal Kombat. In most cases, it's a meeting. But they're the questions I ask myself on a daily basis, hundreds of times a day. Obsessive, yes. Compulsive, yes. A little dramatic, maybe. I don't judge your narratives, I don't judge mine. You know, this is what works for me.
So let's say you have a recession-proof backpack. What are the 3 things that are in there?
Honestly, there's 5 things that everybody needs in a recession backpack. First thing is the control the narrative. They need to understand the importance of the psychology. If you're not controlling the psychology, you're not controlling the game. The person who controls the psychology, the person who controls the perspective is the person who controls the game. Okay, you're either subject to someone else's game, so you're subjective, or you're the object of your game, and you're objective. Just choose where to play. Number 2, you need a plan, and you need a tight, plan that is tactical in nature, that is almost military in design because it's practical. We don't just plan so we know what to do. We plan so we know what to do when nobody does. The plan in most cases isn't required because in most cases you know what to do. A plan is a giant to-do list in most cases. But where a plan really comes into its own is so that you know what to do when you actually can't think. Okay? What do you do when you can't remember what's on your list? Okay? What do you do when the shit's hitting the fan? You need an absolute plan. The third thing you need, okay, in your survival kit is you need a tool, a system, a something, a product, a service, a cheat sheet, a guide. You need something that you can give away, as a form of education, information, entertainment, inspiration, whatever, that is compelling and interesting enough that either adds value, solves a problem, makes them laugh enough for them to want to give you some more information back in return. And what I'm talking about here is the skill to market. It's not even necessarily about having something, a piece of paper that you can give away that's got value on it. That, if anything, is the consequence of where you get to when someone's ready to have a drink with you, when someone's ready to give you their phone number. But you've got to understand, in most cases, people aren't ready to give you a phone number until you've got to know them a little bit. They're not ready for a coffee until you've at least proved there's a level of compatibility. And how do we do that? How do we do that in a socially isolated world? Well, we're in a socially isolated world which is driven by social media that gives us the ability to pump out content at levels, up until this point, that would be unprecedented. Why? Because up until this point, we haven't been able to pump out content because we've been busy. Too busy running their business. They're too busy being a parent. They're too busy picking up the kids and dropping off at school and soccer and hockey and everything else. But now we have an abundance of time, okay? Which we're probably also going to see abundance of fucking excuses as well. But the reality is, the only excuse that you've got is the one that's big enough to compel you not to do the thing that could potentially save your family. So let's weigh it up. Who's got a better excuse, to do or to not to do? We're not a victim of our circumstance. We're a victim of our story. And there will be many stories of inspiration that will come out of this that will appear in times like maybe even now, like total death and destruction and chaos. The 4th thing we need in our survival kit is we need sales. Because what's the point of generating leads if we don't actually convert those leads into sales and revenue in the first place? Anyone can generate leads, but generating leads in most cases is going to cost money. And sales, by virtue of what that is cash flow. It's a cash flow activity. By virtue of, marketing is a cash flow activity. But in most cases, you've got cash flowing out, okay, in advance as an investment strategy in the hope that that's going to plant some seeds and it's going to give you some fruit in the form of a cash flow return, which is in your sales. And right now the government is talking about giving out an incredible amount of stimulus. Banks are talking about giving out an incredible range of interest-free loans, which is great. Okay, and you should get a hold of that if you can and you need it. But imagine if you didn't need it. Imagine if you were insulated, vaccinated, immunized against the environment because your systems are so powerful. You know how to get your head in the game. You know how to generate, you know how to put a plan together. You can generate leads and you can go out there and you can make sales and produce that cash flow based on the new pivot that you've got because you're not a massage therapist anymore. You're now a counselor or a life coach or whatever your thing is. But you've got to get the cash flowing. And the cash doesn't flow until someone sells something. Nobody happens until something sells. And the fifth thing we need is scalability. And this is where most people don't understand scalability. So the 5 things that we have, right? We have the psychology, we have the plan, we have the marketing, we have the sales, and we have the scalability. Now, for the most part, we talk about scalability in the context of leadership and how do we become the leader that's required at that frequency that's required to attract the talent that's required to help us evolve to that next step. Okay, and that's what we talk about. But what we don't talk about is scalability from the concept of scaling a business isn't just knowing how to scale a business up. It's also about understanding the mechanics of how do you scale a business down. And those mechanics are often not considered in the startup world of raising capital and having front-end businesses that don't earn money that are based on valuations of being able to raise capital. Scalability is a two-way street. Can you scale up? Congratulations, you've just increased your fixed overheads by $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. Can you rip it out just as fast if you need to and still maintain operations and still run profitably? Scalability is a two-way street. Learning how to scale up is only by virtue should be preparing you for what's required to scale up to continue to scale, and it should give you the breadcrumbs of where you drop that scale up to know where you need to go on the way back if you need to go back quickly. And so for me, you've got to know how to get your head in the game. You've got to have a solid plan. That plan needs to be focused on the most important things, which are we actually generating leads? Are we making sales and delivering value? And you've got to understand that fifth element, which is scalability. Your survival kit, you're going to need to know, wow, things are looking good. You might have a couple of months where scale up again, great. But then what if there's another round of pandemic? What if there's another pandemic? Then you might have to scale back again. Scalability is like playing a harmonica. It's not a harmonica, it's a concertina. Can you expand and contract with the amount of air that you have available to you to generate noise? Music. Recession-proof.
If you're not Kerwin Ray, what do you do right now in the current state of it?
You get your shit together really fucking quick. And you do it not because you want to be anyone other than who you are, and the greatest example of what that looks like for whoever depends on you right now. Because the reality is, you don't have to be me, you don't have to be The Rock, you don't have to be anyone to succeed in what's going on right now. You just have to be the best version of yourself and not be attached to what success looks like. But please understand that if you have failed to prepare at this point, that's just a warning that there's still time. Okay, as long as there's oxygen in your lungs, as long as you've got air around you, and there's light shining on trees that can produce fruit, there's going to be a way. But we've got to make it, and it starts with a plan. And you've got to plan now. And if you're not planning, don't do it for yourself. Do it for those you care about.
I'm a man on a mission. I don't need no permission.